Hi, I'm Lenna Allen, one of Harmony Family Center's ASAP therapists. I want to read you a book that I often read to the kids that I work with. It's called Frog's Breathtaking Speech, and it's by Michael Chissick. It talks about the many ways that breathing can be helpful to us. I also don't read every single word in the book because I like to use my imagination. So the book starts out with one warm, sunny day. Frog is sitting by the river's edge, and he is looking very, 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 very sad. Along comes his friend Crocodile, and he looks at Frog's face and he says, "Frog, why are you so sad?" Frog says, "I'll tell you why I'm so sad. Tomorrow morning at Frog School, I have to give a speech about breathing. I don't know much about breathing, and that makes me very, 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 very scared." Crocodile listened carefully. He smiled and he said, "I know an excellent way to breathe. This is what I do. I breathe in through my nose and I breathe out through my nose. Let's try that. Let's breathe in and breathe out." Frog, I would say this is a very interesting way to breathe because when you breathe slowly and carefully in and out, it helps to calm you. That means if you're worried, anxious, or frightened about something, it can help calm you down. I am very proud of this breath, and I call it the crocodile breath. "I see," said Frog. "That's an interesting way to breathe. I will make a note about it in my notepad. Thank you, Crocodile." "You are welcome," said Crocodile, and he slithered down the river. Well, Frog finished his notes, and he continued to sit by the river's edge, looking sad, but not quite as sad as before. Along came his friend the Lion. When Lion looked at Frog's face, he said, "Frog, why are you so sad?" Frog said, "I'll tell you why I'm sad. Tomorrow morning, I have to give a speech about breathing. I don't know much about breathing, and I am very, very, very scared." Lion listened carefully, smiled, and said, "I know an interesting way to breathe. This is what I do. I breathe in through my nose, and then I roar out through my mouth, like this." Lion breathed in, and he roared out, "Roar!" He stretched apart each of his claws. He raised his eyebrows, and he loosened his jaw as wide as he could. He also stuck his pink tongue out as far as he could go, and he let out the most enormous roar you have ever heard. Let's try that. Breathe in through your nose. Roar! Frog, I would say this is a very interesting way to breathe because when you roar out your breath like that, it helps loosen your jaw. And maybe if you've been holding it really tight and tense, it'll help loosen it. Also, if you practice your stronger voice, then people can hear you. When your teacher says, "Speak up, I can't hear you," you can use your louder voice. I am very proud of this breathing. I call it lion's breath. "I see," said Frog. "That's an interesting way to breathe. I will make a note of it in my notepad." "You are welcome," replied Lion, and he slithered off into the meadow. Frog finished his notes and sat at the river's edge, looking sad, but not quite as sad as before. When along came his friend the Hummingbee. When Hummingbee saw Frog's face, he said, "Why so sad, Frog?" Frog said, "I'll tell you why. Tomorrow I have to give a speech about breathing. I don't know much about breathing, and I am very, very scared." Hummingbee listened and said, "I know an interesting way to breathe. I breathe in through my nose, and I hum out through my mouth like this." And with that, he expanded his chest like a balloon when he breathed in through his nose, and then he breathed out through his mouth. He hummed out through his mouth, and he said, "If I run out of breath, I just start again." So let's try that. Raise your chest like a balloon. Frog, I would say this is a very interesting way to breathe because when you hum, it helps headaches go away. And even if you don't have a headache, it can be a fun thing to do. I am very proud of this breath, and I call it the hummingbee breath. I see, said Frog. This is an interesting way to breathe. I will make a note about it in my notepad. Thank you, Hummingbee. You're welcome. And Hummingbee buzzed off to the poppy field. Frog finished his notes and continued to sit by the river, but he was looking a lot less sad when along came his friend Mr. Grumble, the woodchopper. Mr. Grumble said, Frog, why are you looking sad? Frog said, I'll tell you why. Tomorrow morning I have to make a speech about breathing. I don't know much about breathing, and I am very scared. Mr. Grumble listened, and he said, I know an interesting way to breathe. This is what I do. I stand straight with my feet apart. Then I raise my axe over my head, keeping my arms straight. I take a deep breath in, and then I cry out, ha, as fiercely as I can. And with that, he raised his axe over his head. He breathed in through his nose, and then he brought his axe down between his feet, saying, ha, as slowly as he could. Let's do that again. Ha! Good job. Frog said, this is a very interesting way to breathe. Mr. Grumble said, especially when you're angry. This is because the ha breath can get any anger that's trapped inside out. And when your anger has escaped, you feel calm and happy instead. I'm very proud of this breath, and I call it the woodchopper breath. I see, said Frog. That's an interesting way to breathe. I will make a note about it in my notepad. Thank you, Mr. Grumble. And Mr. Grumble said, you're welcome, and went off into the forest. Frog went home as fast as his little legs could hop, and he worked on his notes. It was quite a task, but he worked hard. The next morning, he got up and dressed in his frog uniform, and he looked through the door, through the glass, into the hall, and he saw 300 frog students waiting to hear his speech. Frog felt more than nervous. He felt more than anxious. He felt more than worried. He was so scared. His hands were clammy, and he could feel butterflies in his tummy. Oh dear, will I be able to talk? What breath should I use to calm myself down? Should I do the lion breath? Do we remember that one? Or the hummingbee breath? Maybe the woodchopper breath. Or perhaps the crocodile breath. What do you think he chose? Frog made his decision. I'll choose the crocodile breath. That's the one to settle me. So he stood outside in the hall, breathing carefully for about 5 minutes, and when he felt calm enough, he strode into the hall. The place fell silent, and all the frog students stared at him, waiting. Frog cleared his throat and began his speech. All his anxiety and worries disappeared. He felt brave enough to look at the audience and only needed his notes a few times. Gosh, he thought to himself, there's more. I'm more than a little surprised, but it looks like they're enjoying it. As indeed they were. The hall was stunningly silent. No one moved, no one hopped, no one spoke, no one fidgeted. You could hear a pin drop, except of course for the sound of Frog's voice. And that is why I think breathing is an interesting subject. Thank you for listening, Frog said. Suddenly an explosion of clapping filled the hall. As the clapping faded, the head frog teacher hopped to the front of the hall and spoke. Frog, you made a wonderful speech today. We could hear every word. It was enjoyable and interesting, and we learned ways that breathing could help us. Let me present to you a certificate. Frog looked at the golden certificate in his webbed hand. It read, Frog's Breathtaking Speech. He thought for a moment how he had changed his sadness to happiness. He felt strong inside, knowing that if problems came his way, he could at least solve some of them by using his breath. Thank you for listening. Here's a picture of Hummingbee for the last little breath. And I hope you practice your breathing this week. Bye-bye.